December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor killed over 2,400 Americans, destroyed battleships, and thrust the United States into World War II. It was a decision that ultimately led to Japan's total defeat and nuclear devastation. But what if Japan had never launched that attack? What if cooler heads had prevailed in Tokyo? Today, we're exploring an alternate timeline where Pearl Harbor never happened. In our timeline, Japan attacked Pearl Harbor because they felt cornered. The United States had imposed crippling oil embargoes in response to Japanese aggression in China and Southeast Asia. Japan's military needed oil to continue their expansion, and they saw three options: abandon their imperial ambitions, find another oil source, or eliminate the American Pacific Fleet that threatened their plans to seize Dutch and British oil fields in Southeast Asia. They chose option 3. But what if Japan's leadership had made a different calculation? What if they'd recognized that attacking America was strategic suicide? Let's explore this fascinating alternate reality. In this timeline, Japan decides that attacking the sleeping giant of America is too risky. Instead, they pursue a more limited strategy, seizing British and Dutch colonies in Southeast Asia for their oil and resources while avoiding American territory. No attack on Pearl Harbor means no attack on the Philippines, which was American territory. Japan bets that America, still deeply isolationist in late 1941, won't go to war over European colonies in Asia. They're gambling that President Roosevelt, despite his sympathies for Britain, can't get congressional approval for war without a direct attack on American soil or citizens. And they might be right. In our timeline, America was still deeply divided about entering World War II. Isolationist sentiment was strong. The attack on Pearl Harbor united the country overnight, but without that attack, Roosevelt faces enormous political obstacles to entering the war. Japan proceeds with occupying French Indochina, invading British Malaya and Singapore, and seizing the Dutch East Indies for their oil. Britain, already fighting for survival against Nazi Germany, can't adequately defend these distant colonies. They fall to Japanese forces through late 1941 and early 1942. Roosevelt is furious. He increases military aid to Britain and China, tightens economic pressure on Japan, and moves the Pacific Fleet to more aggressive positions. But without American casualties, he can't convince Congress to declare war. The isolationist movement, led by figures like Charles Lindbergh, argues that Asian colonial disputes aren't America's problem. Here's where the timeline splits dramatically. In Europe, without American entry into the war, Nazi Germany isn't fighting on two fronts. The Soviet Union still bears the brunt of the fighting, and by 1943, the tide is turning against Hitler. But without American forces landing in North Africa, Italy, and eventually France, the war drags on longer. Britain survives thanks to American Lend-Lease, but can't launch major offensives without American troops. The war in Europe becomes primarily a Soviet-German struggle. By 1945 or 1946, the Soviets defeat Nazi Germany, but Soviet forces occupy far more of Europe than in our timeline, perhaps all of Germany, Austria, and even parts of France and Italy. Before we explore what happens next, if you're finding this alternate history fascinating, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We dive into mind-bending what-ifs like this every week. Drop a comment below. Do you think America would have stayed out of the war? Let's continue. Meanwhile, in Asia, Japan consolidates its empire. With oil from the Dutch East Indies, they can sustain their military. China continues to resist, but without massive American aid, the war becomes a bloody stalemate. The famous hump airlift from India never reaches the scale it did in our timeline. By 1945, the situation is tense but stable. Japan controls Korea, Manchuria, much of coastal China, French Indochina, Malaya, Singapore, the Dutch East Indies, and various Pacific islands. It's an enormous empire extracting resources to fuel Japanese industry. But here's the crucial question: what about the atomic bomb? In our timeline, the Manhattan Project was accelerated by fears of German nuclear weapons and ultimately used against Japan. In this timeline, the bomb is still developed by 1945, but there's no active American war to use it in. The Soviets defeat Germany without nuclear weapons. Japan hasn't attacked America. President Truman has this devastating weapon, but no clear target. Does America use it as a threat to force Japan to withdraw from China? Does the very existence of the bomb change international relations before it's ever used in war? The post-war world looks radically different. Without American occupation, Japan doesn't become a democracy. The military government that launched the Asian expansion remains in power, though perhaps somewhat reformed. Japan remains an empire and a major power, though economically strained by occupying hostile territories. The Cold War still emerges, but the battle lines are different. The Soviet Union controls most of Europe. Western Europe, Britain, France, and perhaps parts of Western Germany, aligns with America, but the Iron Curtain runs much further west. Communist influence is stronger across Europe. In Asia, an interesting dynamic develops. Both America and the Soviet Union oppose Japanese imperialism, but for different reasons. Japan becomes a third power center, neither capitalist democracy nor communist state, but a militaristic empire. The world becomes tripolar rather than bipolar. Fast forward to 2025 in this alternate timeline. Japan likely lost its empire eventually, either through nationalist uprisings, international pressure, or economic unsustainability. But the transition happens differently than the total defeat and occupation of our timeline. Modern Japan might be more militaristic and nationalist, without the pacifist constitution imposed by American occupation. The economic miracle might not happen the same way without American investment and open markets. Japanese society could be more conservative and traditional. In Europe, Soviet influence extends further west. More of Germany is communist. France and Italy have stronger communist parties. The European Union either never forms or looks very different. America's role is diminished. Without the clear-cut victory over Germany and Japan, American global leadership is less accepted. The post-war international order, the United Nations, NATO, the Bretton Woods system, either doesn't exist or is much weaker. Perhaps most significantly, nuclear weapons might never be used in war. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in our timeline showed the world the true horror of nuclear weapons. In this timeline, without that demonstration, nuclear weapons might be seen as just another military tool, potentially making nuclear war more likely in subsequent decades. Would this world be better or worse? Tens of thousands of Japanese civilians at Hiroshima and Nagasaki would have lived, but millions more might have died in a prolonged war or in potential future nuclear conflicts. The democratic transformation of Japan never happens. Soviet domination of Europe is more complete. American global leadership is weaker. The decision to attack Pearl Harbor was catastrophic for Japan, but it shaped our entire modern world. One choice by Japanese leaders in 1941 created the world we know today. A different choice would have created something almost unrecognizable. What do you think? Would America have eventually entered the war anyway, or stayed neutral? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this alternate history, check out our video on What If Germany Won World War I? Link in the description. Don't forget to subscribe for more fascinating what ifs, and I'll see you in the next video.